Later in the programme, we're going to be talking to Guy Ryder of the International Labour Organization, who'll give us the perspective from the Syria donor conference in London, where $10 billion has been pledged. The question is whether and how and where you spend that money and what really needs to be done. That's still to come on Cresswell's Business. Good evening to you. The International Labour Organization says it's pushing hard to try to get refugees into work. The Director General visited a refugee camp in Jordan last week. Guy Ryder now joins me from London. Good to see you. We talked earlier this week on other issues, Guy, but now obviously we're talking this serious question. Now, what is it the ILO believes can be done to help the refugees find work, but at the same time, as you heard in Jemana's report, not at the expense of the indigenous population where unemployment's high to begin with?
Yeah, it's quite a conundrum, isn't it? But it's not just the ILO. I think one of the key messages from the conference in London today, in addition to the ongoing priority of humanitarian protection, there were two new elements. One is this issue of labour markets and finding refugees pathways into the labour markets in the host countries, and the other, by the way, was education. But there is a consensus out there that in current circumstances, it's absolutely accepted by all parties, I think, including the host countries and the international community, that we do have to find these pathways into labour markets for these refugees. Now, how do you do that in labour markets which are pretty stressed as it is? You know, unemployment in Jordan is between 12 and 13%, and without putting Jordanians and Syrians into situations of competition. Let's take the example of Jordan. I think there's two big ideas out there. One is to use and to expand the industrial zones which already exist in Jordan, very much linked to the garment and textile industry, particular market access to the US market. Jordanians want to see that extended to European markets. And the other piece is to simply put in place something which is tried and trusted, which are employment-intensive work programs and investment programs. These can work in the short term. Right. Now,
employment-intensive work programs, that, of course, government-funded, centrally funded, or indeed internationally funded. The bill for that goes on to, if you like, onto the aid budget of other countries. Now, look, Guy, I'm not suggesting for a moment in any form of naivete that there is an easy, simple solution here. But I am suggesting that the complexity means that there is no obvious or solution.
Look, I agree with you on the complexity, and I worry sometimes that the idea with sufficient investment, sufficient market access, get on with it, it will work automatically, is oversimplistic. Our experience is that you really have to engineer the labour market access very, very carefully. We've been working in the industrial zones in Jordan already for nearly a decade. And by the way, the people working in those zones are not Jordanians. They're by and large Southern Asian people, Bangladeshis and Sri Lankans. Now, there is a potential to create jobs and to move Syrians into these areas, but you're quite right to point to the complexity. This is not a problem which is insoluble, it's not impossible, it's not an illusion, but it needs to be worked at extremely well.
So wherever we look here, Guy, you know, you take the zones, fine, you put the Syrians into the zones and you risk displacing the South Asians who are working there at the moment. You take the migrants that have gone up into Europe, that could be a depressing force on wages and terms and conditions of living, of employment in Europe. You take those in the camps. I know you know this, but I suggest that donor conferences don't solve it.
No, but you need the money nonetheless. What can a donor conference do? It can put up the money and it can point out the political objectives. And then we have to follow up and make this happen. Now, we have to start from a realization. Take the example again of Jordan. Most Syrian males who are living outside of the refugee camps, and it's the vast majority of them, are working already. They're working in agriculture, they're working in construction, and of course they're working informally. Wage levels are already going down in Jordan. Conditions are being undermined already by this informal labour market. 70% of kids who work in Jordan are Syrians. So we really do have to transit to legal avenues to get these people working in an orderly and controlled way. Now, I do believe it can be done, and I do believe there are ways to combine the interests of local workers with those of Syrians. It will take investment, but it will take some very hard work at designing things that have a long-term chance of succeeding.
Guy Ryder, who's joined us from London. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Thank you. And it's worth just pointing out that hopefully nothing our discussion there with Guy Ryder just makes it clear the difficulty and the complexity of the situation.